Good morning and welcome to Unity Radiant Light. It's Sunday, November 3rd, 2024, and I'm Reverend Cherie Ruffo, and today I'm going to be talking about accessing the field. And when I'm talking about the field, I'm talking about the quantum field, the things that are unseen, not always easy to explain. We know there's this energy field that we are part of, and today we're going to explore what that means and how can we access it more. I mean, the truth is we're never separate from it. But what we're striving to do is to become aware of it, more aware of it all the time. Because it didn't just start in the last few decades when we started using the word quantum field, or, it didn't just appear. It's always been here and we've always had access to it. And we know that so in the past, going back thousands of years, that the quantum field has been something that's been understood, that we can access this. So what happens, what happened in the times before, information about this was written down? You know, the indigenous people, they knew about this power and this energy. And before there were written words, they shared an oral tradition. They told stories through it. Jesus, when he was teaching students, he often used stories to illustrate something so that they would retain the concept of it. They'd understand it and they could share it generation to generation. So we've seen this happen a lot over time. And we know that different ways to access this field, or the concepts from the field, can be told toward oral histories. It can happen through a song. Ever song begins to play and you just feel differently. It's almost like every cell in your body is responding to that. That's the field. Certain music tones, hertz frequencies, they're used for healing, abundance, and all different things. Dancing, just letting loose and dancing to something, because that's bringing the joy up within us. And we know that in the healing field is fueled by joy. Storytelling. I love storytellers. And when I retire at some point, I want to learn how to become one. Have you ever sat and just listened to a storyteller tell a story? I remember when I was at the Epilepsy Foundation and the Diabetes Foundation, that we had summer camps for kids, and we would hire storytellers to come in to teach kids about different concepts. Local storytellers from the indigenous tribes would come in and teach, and that was amazing. It's beautiful. So stories about our past were the easiest way to keep stories alive from generation to generation, especially when we didn't have a written form of a language. According to most scholars, the stories of the Bible transitioned primarily through the oral tradition down the centuries until they were written down. They think that the earliest part of the Hebrew Bible that the stories come from may have been the 10th century BC. And it took thousands of years, hundreds of years, up to thousands of years, to be able to write them down. We know that the New Testament was written down several decades after Jesus' death, meaning that it took centuries to complete again. So we think about that. We think about how these traditions come down and how we can use these stories about accessing the field. There's a long history. And we often wonder what's been forgotten, what's not been shared. So we know that this field of consciousness is where we come from. And the more that we have, more awareness we have of it, the more that we can work with the energy from within that field in a conscious way. I know in Uluru, you see it here in Australia, the Anuanis, elders of the Aboriginal village, they're not open. They weren't open. They were closed culture until fairly recently. See, their tradition of stories goes back 40,000 years. Think about that. A lot of people on the planet don't believe we've been here more than 5,000. So how can this be? Think about that. So the traditions that they've brought forward, and they've been able to teach them these concepts to each generation. One of my favorite places, of course, is I lived in Hawaii for a long time. And they have a rich tradition of storytelling and accessing the field and learning these lessons. And they're all about that light. Same thing as Australia, light within, bringing that light to it. Here we see Kuna Kalei, who was one of my teachers. She left the earth plane in 2020. Amazing. And she has the Kilauea active volcano behind her. And she's telling stories and she's teaching these concepts because she was from a kahuna line, 77 generations of kahunas. She also downloaded into her beautiful artwork. And you see on the right with the gentleman, the bowl of light, the light that's from within us is that bowl of light. So they're teaching that there's something profound about us in humanity, that we have this sacred knowledge, access to it within us. It's within this field. And that we have a long memory and teaching of it. And I know that in Hawaii, they call it talk story, and they tell through talk story. Someone says, "I want to talk story." They tell these traditions, they tell these lessons, and they share them. Wonderful thing if you ever can sit down for one. We also see them through cave paintings, drawings, carvings. And then they leave us messages for today. And there's some things that are out there today in these cave drawings that we just don't understand still. So we always have to ask the question, what are the ancients, what are our ancestors trying to teach us that we may not know anymore? But we can access these ideas by accessing the field. So the first thing we have to understand about the field is that we're part of that field, which means that we're one with everyone else. And oneness is such a difficult concept for us to understand because in this third dimension of living, we live in linear time. So from the time we're born, we're raised to believe that one thing comes after another. 2 follows 1, 3 follows 2, and that's how everything's supposed to work. But when you access this unseen field, when we open that up, we're accessing something outside of linear time. So that's why it may not always feel like it makes sense to us, but when we start to relax in that vision, we start to let go of the things that we've been taught. We open up to a multidimensional reality. And when people talk about dimensions today, they'll say, "Oh my gosh, we're in the third dimension." Like I said, going to the fourth dimension, to the fifth dimension. That's very linear too. We could just say we're multidimensional and leave it at that because we don't have to put these labels on it. So when we enter this multidimensional state, we are in the quantum field. We're a part of each other, all one. And we know that this is true. We know that when we are we hear truth. And whenever you do hear truth, whenever I hear it, every cell in my body responds to it. It knows. It's in our teachings. It's in all the different indigenous records. It's how people teach us. We talk about the different aspects, and especially when we look at the indigenous populations and we look at the Inuits of Alaska and Canada, and they have throat singing. And it's a very different thing to listen to, but have you ever sat and just realized how your body responds to it? Because our bodies know truth and it responds to it. We know here that in mass consciousness, we look at this and we stop and we think we see Kahuna Kalei over in the left-hand corner. And she's with Dr. Tato Vakaites and Cryon Channel. And we look at that. This is a Maui Lemurian choir, and every person in this room is being trained to sing different chords that aren't from the English language. And if you have a chance to look them up because it's amazing. Every cell in your body too responds to it because there's something very sacred. And it's letting the planet and the universe know that we arrived, that we are transforming into ascension. In Thailand, we see 5,000 schools, 1 million children meditating for world peace. They understand this concept that when you bring that many people together in the field, they're creating change. And that change is happening across the world. It's felt in every corner of the earth. And in small groups of people we see that are meditating, We're opening our consciousness because we know there's large groups meditating all the time. We're joining our consciousness, and we do that through the field. So it's within this field that we can create and make the change. And we think about that with even unity. We're taught in unity to understand these principles, and these principles are from the field. Our first basic unity principle is there's one presence and one power in the universe, and it's God and good, and it's good. So if that presence is in everything in the universe, that can only mean that's within each one of us, not just a few people. It doesn't work that way. It's in every single person. We are here to experience God. We're here just to experience this essence. And Jesus the Christ fully expressed it. He came here and he gave us that blueprint. So if that's the case, then that makes us co-creators with God. We're creating reality through our thoughts held in our mind, but also through our feelings, through our belief systems. If we have things in the subconscious that would tell us we're not worthy to do this or whatever it may be, we have to work with that. We have to let that go so we can be full creators, and we can access this field and these things and help create peace, healing, and everything else through prayer and meditation. If you're a Unity Truth student, we use affirmations and denials. They're very powerful. And we know that through these thoughts and words and actions that we live, we take action on them to live the truth on this planet. And I love the 5 principles from the kids' perspective, because they just have to remember in their fingers each one. God is, I am. I think, I pray, I live. It seems so simple, but it can be difficult to do, especially if we know that we're changing our consciousness while we're doing this. We're making these changes, and we're raising not only our lives up in consciousness, but we're contributing to that for the whole planet. So if God is in everything, including us, that means we're soul family. That means we're one. That means that when we understand this in the field, that this mass consciousness that we have choice on how to impact it on the planet. As we saw in the previous slide, where 1 million children are meditating together. In unity, we also believe and know we work with our conscious and unconscious. So when we look at this, and not just unity, we think, how can things impact the field? We have mass consciousness. How can we make a change? And also, what happens? Is there anything that can stop this? And we know with fear is a really tough energy to work with, because once we have fear, our consciousness drops. So if we know that in this, we look at these upward spirals and downward spirals, and we see the upward spiral going, and it's leading us to this freedom, and we see on the right side, this ultimate consciousness. But as things start to impact us and fear comes in to the picture, there's also can be a downward spiral. So that's why sometimes when there's things that we really don't want to happen, but we're really afraid of it, and so much of the population is really afraid of that outcome, we see it happen because of the consciousness where it is. This is energy, and it's recognized as energy, whether it's negative or positive. So it's really important. We think, well, I'm just going to have a bad day. It's really important for us to center ourselves and know that we're contributing to compassion, to love, to healing, whatever it is on the planet. We really need to be conscious of that. We want to see the less of the suffering, less of the just getting by or giving up or feeling hopeless, and move us upward to this ultimate transformation. We know through Unity, if you're a Unity Truth student, the 5-step prayer process that we use is the first thing we do is we relax. And we allow our minds to quiet. Remember, if you've read the Christian scriptures, the New Testament, Jesus taught we'd see him going to the mountain. And we know that unity is going up in consciousness, to relax, to let go that busy day, to take that deep breath in, and start to let things go. And then we may concentrate on a concept or an affirmation. I love to use this process with the daily word. Look at that affirmation, and we think about that. We think about the God process in all this. We hold that and we hold those truths. And to also recognize that we are born whole and complete. When the co-founders of Unity, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, co-founded it, they did so through the healing principles. They understood what these concepts would bring. That if we see people, so in Unity, if you send in a prayer request or ask for prayer or come to a healing service, that what's happening there is we're not there to heal you. We're looking at you and we see you as whole and complete and magnificent as you already are. And hold that vision of that. And then we let go of this concentration of whatever we have, this mantra, and we drop into meditation. And that's the silence. That's where we rest. And we allow rejuvenation, all the things that happen when we're in full meditation. When we come out of that meditation, oftentimes there'll be concepts. Things will come that weren't there before. It might be an answer to something. I know even with Myrtle Fillmore, when she had a problem or something she couldn't solve, she often recognized, during sleep too, that things could happen, the good things could happen. And what she would do is write it down on a piece of paper, put it under her pillow, and then oftentimes when she woke up in the morning, the answer was there. You ever go to bed with that, or not even, or going to meditation, knowing that there's something you need to solve, and the answer just, it comes. Well, it's coming from the field. And then when we're ready to release all of this, we move to thanks and gratitude. That is in the field. Can't come from negativity once we're in gratitude. So these are important processes, and whatever yours is, it doesn't have to be the same exact thing. Powerful. It works. So how many of you have had these experiences? How many of you have thought of a person and then they called you or they showed up at your doorstep? These are all things, this oneness that we have in the field, this concept that we are all one and we're soul family, we're connected to each other. So there is a lot happening out there just beyond our five senses. And we know that. That's why you're watching this today. I mean, how about the shamans in our group? We have several shamans, and they're here because they're working in the field with the healers. We have our monthly healing circles, our group. We have shamans. We have people who practice theta and Reiki masters, and people using the unity prayer process, and meditators. And with all of this, we may have different names or different specialties, all coming from a place where we've accessed the fields. So why do we have, with all of this, then why do we have people with different concepts, different perspectives? Why do we have so many different religions on the planet? I think it makes things interesting that we do, but it's also because when we're accessing this field, this process, that our filters are in place. So these are the things where our belief system, maybe some of our fears, whatever we have going on inside of us is filtering these ideas. So they're going to show up differently. Not a bad thing. Doesn't mean that someone's always right and someone's wrong. That's not what this is about at all. It's just about where perception is. So how is it working for you? How are you doing? If we're recognizing that everyone is in the field, we know that the way we alchemize this soulless world into a sacred world is by treating everyone as if they are sacred until the sacred in them remembers. So we're not accessing people and saying you're wrong, you're this. We're just very simply holding that and looking at God. We're looking at a spark of God, piece of God, whatever it is that you call each of the individuals on this planet. And we're seeing them as they truly are, with that spark inside. So the field contains everything. healing truth, inventions, all the things that are coming are there already. And we can access this. We can use this. We can find our joy. We can let these things infuse us. So remember, Jesus said, "You are the light of the world," and let it just pour out into the world, helping to change, to heal situations, to helping people in the moment, places that are at war, so they can see peace. We know that this field is of oneness, and we're all in it, whether we recognize it or not. The field is, you think of it like an enhanced intuition. So you may hire someone, go to their class, sign up for a class, pay for it, to learn how to access the field. But always remember that it's not just for a special few people. This is for everybody. So you don't have to do any of those processes, or you can do it to be in a group. It doesn't matter. You are always going to have access to this field. And if you're having trouble accessing it, just stop and think, am I in my intellect right now? Is that what's going on? Have I opened my heart center? And if you feel like your heart center needs to be open a little more, drop into it. It's a beautiful thing. So when we look at, a lot of stories about artists, musicians, inventors, or whoever out there who have done these great things, oftentimes they'll say that it happened when they weren't thinking about it. They're still in the field and they've let an idea go to percolate, and they're open for that. And oftentimes it's when they let that go, that thought go, and all the problems and the things that might be causing resistance from getting the answer is when the answers come. So some of your best ideas, your downloads, your solutions to things, could happen when you're meditating on that field, when you're letting the thought go in, and when you go to sleep at night. Be open. Have your heart open to some of these solutions. On a planet of 8 billion people, most of humanity still doesn't believe the field exists. What's your belief? How do you feel about that when we talk about this field? What are your ideas for it? We have a choice. And when we make that choice to work with the field or not, impacts our life. So I'm going to close today with a poem by Robert Frost. And it's called The Road Not Taken. Some of you might be familiar with it. So I'm going to read it, just allow the words to sink in. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that passing there, had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves, no step had trodden back black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on the way. I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere in ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So think about this. Think about being active in this field, opening yourself to love, open yourself to all possibilities as you access the field, enjoying this oneness, because we could never be alone in this process. I'm so grateful for these poems and these lessons and what Jesus came to teach us and all the other great masters. The answers are always been there. So I invite you to access that field, raise your awareness of it, and live consciously from it. Namaste. So grateful to be on this path with you.